Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Carrie Linklater. I'm your chairperson today. I'm joined on the panel by Gisela Rempel and Brent McIntyre. Our city assessor is Merrick Floyd, and our admin secretary is Huda Aziz. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. And as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Let's swear Mr. Story in.
Please state your full name. And you swear the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You like to swear?
Yes, Sid Story.
And you swear the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Story and
Good morning.
Mr. Froelich. Before we start, Mr. Froelich,
Yeah.
I have never encountered one of these.
Yeah, that's a withdrawal from Mr. Story with regards to the property
Oh,
on
okay.
1750 Inkster. Oh, that's an increase. There was an increase. Oh, sorry, I didn't know what.
I'm sorry.
So I applied for an increase for 1750 Inkster, and Mr. Story and I had some discussions, and he's planning to withdraw the value for 1750 Inkster. I think you did the paperwork, Sid?
Yes, I signed, I signed it for $15.95.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it was the other way around,
Okay.
Sid. Yeah, because I applied for the increase on 1750 Inkster.
I'll get you a new withdrawal form.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
So you're planning to withdraw this?
Yes, we're withdrawing one and adjusting the other. Yes.
And I'm making a recommendation on 1595 Buffalo Place.
Okay. I thought that one was withdrawn.
No, I think,
I think I remember the wrong file number. Oh, you just want to see each?
But I think that Buffalo Place was withdrawn.
Yeah, he filled out the wrong one, so I'm gonna fill out the correct one now.
Okay, so it is withdrawn?
Not Buffalo, the
1750 Inkster.
Inksters.
That's being withdrawn.
Yeah.
Okay, I had the other one. Okay, there we go. So we are going to start with 1595 Buffalo.
That is correct.
All right. Whenever you are ready.
File number is 194186. Roll number is 030715900500. The assessed value for this property for April 1st, 2018 was $8,663,000. The applicant and I have agreed to a value of $8 million for this property in the 2020 period. And we used our parameters. We just adjusted the rental rate.
Thank you. And you're in agreement with this, Mr. Story?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. McIntyre, any questions in regard to this recommendation?
What did the rental rate go to?
I think if I remember correctly, it'll just be north between $825 and $850 a square foot.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Ruffle?
I have no further questions, thank you.
And I have no questions on this. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I made this fancy chart and everything, Sid, with vacancy rates. But I'm sure the panel members will be happy.
And thank you, Mr. Story,
Thank you.
for coming on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you're it. Still pens and dockets.
Bradford Scott Workshop.
And you swear the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the
No
whole
problem,
truth,
take care,
and
sir.
nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank
You
you.
didn't? No. It's always a pleasure.
Give me a call, Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be the best with regards to other stuff.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Borgstrom.
Good morning.
And whenever you're ready, we are now looking at 170 Salto Crescent.
File number is 192198. Roll number is 0756 168 200. Assessed value for 2020 we have is $8,669,000. We have two buildings. The years built were between 1999 and 2004. The wall heights for this property is between 20 and 28 feet. The breakdown for the wall height is 56,534 square feet, was built in 1999, and that's at 28 feet. And 26,738 square feet was built in 2004, and that's at 20 feet. The effective age that we have for this property is 1999. We have a land area of 239,613. We have a leasable area of 90,921. We have a land to building ratio at 2.88. And we're asking for the assessed value to be confirmed. I've never inspected this property, but we do have some pictures that was provided from the Altus brief that Mr. Borgstrom presented in 2018. On page 2, we got some pictures of the outside of the building. As you can see from a curb appeal perspective, it is very pleasing to look at. Page 3 shows some internal pictures. Page 4 shows the cleanliness and just the overall layout of the building. The property is in the Murray Industrial Park, which is different than the St. James Industrial Park. So it's in, off Sturgeon in Saskatchewan, further west than St. James. Access through, good access routes. The bottom of page 5 shows the general location of it, where it shows the Saskatchewan Avenue to the north of it. And page 6 shows just the overhead view about this. What's interesting about this property is to the west of it, to the southwest of it, it's actually linked up with the other building here, but it's on a separate roll number. So in theory, it's landlocked because of the fact that sewer and water is coming from the main building to the southwest. But as you could see on, there's access road very easily, and there is potential for access there. There is only, because of the uniqueness of the property, there's sewer across the street, but there's no water lines running directly to the eastern portion of the property. And as you could see, the property to the south is owned by owned by the same company. Just to let everyone know, we haven't done any follow-up work yet, but for the 2020 assessment year, there's actually a permit that was taken out last March, for March 26, 2019. It's for, I don't know the details of it, but there's a declared construction value of $3 million worth of work coming into the property.
What page are you on?
I'm just reading that off. I didn't include it in my brief, but I'm making reference to it.
And so again, it's properly something that should have been included in the assessor's brief. I've not had a chance to investigate or examine that particular aspect of this.
There are many situations where agents speak without having information in their brief.
Yeah, he's giving verbal evidence, but note taken, thank you.
Property owners have been compliant with regards to completing the income and expense mailer, showing that it is owner occupied on the top of page 7. There were some sales that had taken place in June 27th of 2001. But that's 17 years away from our reference date. What I've done for comparables, so this building is built in 1999, and so there isn't a lot of storage warehouses that are around 90,000 square feet in the neighborhood. So what I tried doing is I tried getting some big ones and some smaller ones that were just in the northwest quadrant of the city of Winnipeg. I do have one on Saskatchewan, which is 100,000 square feet, which is a much older building at the very bottom at 1976 for $5 a square foot. Then I also got a newer building, which is similar to the subject property, at $6.53 a square foot at $111,763, and I got some other rents here of other properties. On page 9, what we have here is we're showing the leasable area of 90,921 for a potential rent of $680,481. Our blended rate for this property is $6.38. Using a vacancy loss of 2.5%, expenses at 2%, shortfall at $3.75, we come up with a net operating income of $546,126. Using the 6.3% cap rate, because this is a newer building, we come up with a value of $8,669,000. And actually, the permit information that I was speaking about is actually in my brief. Due to our workload, so it was there for your review, Brad.
Well, I asked you what page you were.
Yeah, and the point is, busy workload, and you forget these things. Yeah. So, what I've done here, sometimes it's good to look at previous briefs just to learn about the property and whatnot. And what I found interesting about the 2018 brief that was presented by, I do believe, Mr. Boardroom, is that they were looking for a rent of $6.29 per square foot, which is actually very close to the model rent that we're using of $6.38 in 2020. So what is also interesting that I'll make reference later on, with regards to our cap rate studies, what we have here is we have a range of industrial cap rates between 5.5 to 9.8, the 20th and 80th percentile, 6.34 to 7.8. What we have here as well is we have the cap rates study that was done by Altus with regard to their properties. They're showing that cap rates that are between, just under 7%. But these buildings here are a bit older than the subject property. The closest one, which was built in 1990, had a 6.5% cap rate. We're using 6.3. So I think, and in that regards, it is slightly smaller than the subject property. It is smaller than the subject property. We've gone over review capitalization evidence with regards to what we've used. We've discussed our non-recoverable expenses on many occasions. I do have documentation here to show it panel members if they want, but we've all heard these before. And that concludes my formal presentation. I'm open to questions.
Thank you. Mr. Borgstrom, questions?
I do have just a few. On your page 9, we have, the model has identified 2 separate premise IDs within this building, correct? And the second one, or the bottom one, is mezzanine space?
Yeah.
Yes?
That's what we have it listed here, yes.
Okay, and so that means that that amount of space would have a lower clear ceiling height
Yeah.
on the main level, correct?
Well, there is, without inspecting the building, but also looking at your brief, part of the building has 11-foot ceilings on it. That was listed, and in your brief, I think you said about maybe 10% of the building, 11% of the building?
Okay,
If I
so
recall
let
correctly.
me just keep you to your brief and your evidence here. And so would it be fair to say that the 49 square feet of mezzanine area would have a lower clear ceiling height under it?
Yeah, but it would have a higher quality finish.
You're quite sure that that's obvious?
I haven't inspected the property, but based on your brief that I'm learning for, I haven't had the opportunity to inspect the property. Your brief said that there was about 11% office space, so I'm making the inference that it is. And in your brief from last year that you presented, you did not show any, I don't believe you showed any pictures of office space. But what I'm guessing though is, looking at the layout of the building, I hate to speculate, but I'm guessing if we're looking at the main brown entrance for the building, I'm guessing the second floor space is with 11 feet ceiling height.
But you're not certain, correct? You are speculating.
I'm just going off the information in your brief and what we have here.
So you're speculating.
Well, if reading your brief is speculating, then I guess that's speculating then.
Well, I think we can say that the assessor
Has
did
not
not,
inspected.
it's not inspected.
Now, this property was inspected by an assessor for the last cycle, correct?
I know there was a verbal recommendation done by the assessor in 2018, but I don't see if he inspected it or not. I know Mr. Alden dealt with it, but I don't know when the inspection had taken place.
Okay, and so you have not reviewed any of the department's notes from previous inspections?
I have access to them here, and I'm not seeing the date of the inspection. I know what I'm reading here.
And so the notes that are on file you did not review from previous inspections?
Well, on January, if we must go through my notes. On January 2014, how early do you want me to go, Mr. Bergstrom? Because on January 1st, 2014, 15-1 agreement signed with Mr. Bergstrom at $6.32 million.
so
Well,
Mr. Froelich-
you're asking me to read notes, Mr. Bergstrom?
You will be aware, and actually I will have this addressed with Mr. Shields again. 15-1 agreements are by agreement as between the city and Altus, not referred to.
But they also provide a great baseline of information with regards to previous assessments.
I'll have Mr.
And we all
Shields-
know that the market rents haven't gone down since 2020 from 2018, Mr. Bergstrom.
So in terms of the inspection notes within your information there, did you have an opportunity to review those?
Asked and answered.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that answer. I didn't actually hear an answer regarding the inspections.
I
I understand that he hasn't inspected.
Right.
My question was related to whether or not he had an opportunity to review other assessors' notes from previous inspections.
I actually didn't hear
No,
your
okay.
answer because you.
So
were
starting from January 1st, January 29, 2014, all the way to our last notes that were done on March of 2019, there is no information here with regards to the inspection that I have for notes here. We have 15 ones that I'm not allowed to talk about in 2016 or a recommendation in 2018, but I have nothing in my file notes stating
Okay.
that there was an inspection.
Now, you indicated that this property is owned by the same company as the adjacent property, correct?
That's what it came across in my notes,
And
yes.
so this property is held in the name of American by Access, correct?
Yes,
And the property adjacent you're referring to is at 100 Salto?
yes.
Do you know who owns that property?
Is it the same person that owns, isn't it the same company?
I'm asking you, you made the statement that it was owned by the same company.
Based on my information, when I looked at it, it seemed to be the same company.
Okay, so you're not aware then that 100 Salto is actually owned by Winpack?
But are they not related to one
Winpack
another?
Ltd. Are the owners of that property.
Are they not related in any way, shape, or form?
They have two separate ownerships, correct?
Winpack's different than American Glazex.
And so this property, you've already indicated, is effectively, looking at your page 6, is effectively landlocked. There is no water line coming across from Wyhun Road to the east of the property, correct?
That is correct, but there is sewer on the other side of the street.
And so water actually needs to come from Salto Crescent.
That's correct.
Now, in terms of access for the property, if you look at your page 6 and both the top and the bottom picture, access for vehicle traffic to this site is also across adjacent properties.
That is correct.
Is that not something that might pose an additional risk for anyone?
Not necessarily, because there can be easy access on the eastern portion of the lot.
Okay. And that's not something you've investigated?
I didn't think it would need to be investigated. Because there's lots of circumstances that take place where there's no access. I think recently of the Mercedes-Benz dealership on Kenniston, where they don't have access
You're
to.
looking at your rental comparables on page 8, 999 Edward Street, you show that as Enterprise Industries. In fact, isn't that an enterprise rental car operation?
That's what we have here, yes.
It's an enterprise rental car operation.
Yep. And they have a huge storage facility.
You weren't aware that that is an office and a vehicle service garage adjacent?
It's a combination of things. We had that, or I think I had that with Mr. Becker on appeal coming up soon.
And so then you'll have some familiarity with the property, and so Enterprise Rental Cars has office space in there and a vehicle service garage attached?
Yep.
And you're comparing that to an industrial warehouse?
What I've done, I also have a couple other comparables that are listed below as well.
And so your comparable at 1345 Redwood, that's occupied by Boeing?
That's correct.
Now, that property, do you know if the subject property is fully air conditioned?
The subject property?
Yes.
My guess is, I don't know.
But you'll be aware that 1345 Redwood has undergone substantial renovations and is 100% air conditioned?
Yep.
Is that something that would affect rental rate?
Yeah, but when I looked at the information that we had available with regards to the new building, with information that you had presented in 2018, I thought our model rent was quite reasonable.
The 2.5% vacancy rate is model driven on your page 9,
That is correct.
and that's the only evidence you have with respect to vacancy rate.
I do have some rebuttal information that I'll be presenting later on with regards to the vacancy rate with Murray Industrial Park.
And within your brief, this is the vacancy evidence that you have.
It's model generated.
Okay. Do you know the size of the Murray Park area in terms of building square footage, the total market?
Actually, I do. It's one of the smaller industrial parks, and we have just under 400,000 square feet.
Murray Industrial Park is 400,000 square feet.
Total building areas that we have here, that we have accumulated on the Johnson report, says 397,132,
And-
which seems a bit odd.
Because the adjacent property, 100 Salto, is north of 500,000 square feet.
Well, exactly, and the
So
Boeing property is within there,
you have
exactly.
mapped on in the area
Yeah.
that is, and so.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm using the same Johnson report that you are.
Similarly, with respect to the capitalization rate, this is model driven and based on hypothetical rents.
It's based on actual rents that we received from the 2017 income and expense mailer.
Okay, so let's turn to your page 12. In the second paragraph.
Mr. Boardroom, you and I have asked and answered this question on many occasions, and the answers will stay the same.
So let's turn to the second paragraph at the top of page 12.
Yep.
You see where it says for the 2020 general assessment, capitalization rates were derived from model-generated estimates of net operating
Yep.
income. So hypothetical rents, correct.
Yeah,
And those are
from the
my questions.
2017 mailers.
Those were my questions.
Oh.
Sorry, he was. yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Mr. McIntyre.
Just one question on page 2, bottom picture. When was this picture taken?
August in the wintertime. I got it off Google Maps. No, I could have got it off Google Maps. Maybe I got it from Mr. Borgstrom's brief, but that would be different. Or maybe I got this from our brief that we had used in 2018.
Well, that would be odd because the project manager for the construction of the so-called addition,
Yeah,
that's their sign.
okay.
So it couldn't be 2018 if the permit was 2019.
Oh, okay. Well, like I said, we're busy. I'm just trying to get the information, get pictures on as quickly as I can.
So is there going to be a supplementary assessment issued for this property?
Well, we haven't inspected it yet, so I don't know the details of what sort of work has gone down yet. There's $3 million of being added on, so there's the potential for a supplementary assessment.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
I have no questions, thank you.
Just in regards to your rent comparables,
Yep.
Mr. Froelich, did you have a chance to inspect any of these?
No, not at all. I'm new to the section, and I have not.
Okay. And as you had stated, everything on page 9 is model-driven.
That is correct.
And I know you've probably answered this, but the $3 million reno, you don't have any idea what that encompasses?
No, it's just, and I just brought it up here because, it's what we have. It's this partial permit foundation, so I don't know what extensive work's gonna be taking place. So if there's and in fairness, I could have probably pulled the entire permit and got it, but it's just with the deadlines that we're under.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Borgstrom, if you'd like to give us your brief.
Thank you. And so I'm going to start at our page 4. And you can see from those pictures at the top and the bottom, this property has very limited truck loading capacity. It is a manufacturing facility, light manufacturing facility, and you'll see at the top picture there, that is the limit of the loading doors. And if you flip back to the first page, that will give you an idea. There are, by my count, I think there are 4. It's possible that there are only 3 loading docks there for a building 90,000 square feet in size. The land to building ratio is a little skinny at by my calculation, 2.96 to 1. That's not an amount at which I get bothered about, and so we haven't made any adjustments for that. You'll see there from those pictures that there is no access or boating possibilities at the rear or on the north. And on the south side, which is the picture that you see there on the bottom of the page 4. Again, no boating facilities there, so they are limited. I have included inspections from the previous property, and you'll recall that I asked the assessor about the lower ceiling height. And so on page 16, these are pictures that I took during my inspection during October of 2017, in preparation for the previous appeal. You'll see there the exterior of the property, on the top, on the bottom. That's what you see when you walk in. And so the office space is actually on the mezzanine area, and the lower area has the lower wall height. The office space is upstairs. So we take a look at the office space on page 17. I would describe it as typical industrial office space. By our calculations, it is roughly about 11% of the floor area. That's not an unusually high amount. You would expect to find something in that range. Certainly when you look at the Collier's broker report, the expectations for office finish. You'll see there on page 19, that would be some additional mezzanine space. This is not office. And so you'll see on the bottom there and the top, both of these areas arising from the presence of mezzanine therefore have restricted clear ceiling height. You'll see there on page 20, some additional space for production equipment. Again on page 21, that's stairs up to the mezzanine space. A little clearer picture of the basements, or the main floor space underneath there. You'll see some of the loading bays on page 22. And again on page 23, you will again see the presence of some mezzanine space. This mezzanine space is present solely to house production equipment. It's not office space, it's not usable for anything else. It's used solely to access production equipment. On page 24, again you'll see a different area. This is underneath some of the mezzanine space, again, not office finish. And 25, 26, I'll let you go through the one to leisure, but you can see there that the office space is on the mezzanine level, and the main floor space is limited ceiling height industrial space. So we took a look at a number of rental comparables. And in looking at them, I was looking for sizes, and this list is what it is. The effective age of 1370 Sony, it's had some renovations, 1980. But the effective age is actually probably somewhat newer than that. That's the former, yes.
I'm sorry, which page are you?
I'm on page 7, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we show 11 comparables there. Some of them are in the northwest quadrant, but they are around the city. That arises from the size of the subject property. It is owner occupied, it's a related corporation. And so we took a look at these. You'll see there the wall heights. Based on all of that, I have assigned $550 per square foot. This is on page 8. $550 per square foot to the main floor area, and the mezzanine space, $4 per square foot. Now, if you wanted to apply a lower rate to the main floor space underneath the mezz, it would work out to exactly the same thing. The office area is included within the industrial rates. All of the rental comparables will have, or typically have, office space within them. And so overall, including the mezzanine space, $537 a square foot. For the balance, I took a look at the Johnson reports in terms of vacancy, and I'm going to pause here and just go through briefly our capitalization rate study, which includes some information about vacancy rates generally in the northwest quadrant. So in our industrial capitalization rate study on page 6, you'll see there, that's a picture of the Centreport area. You will see towards the top of the
I don't
page
think this is page 6.
of our capitalization rate study.
Oh.
Sorry, it's underneath the,
Sorry, yeah.
it's right.
Thank you.
No, there it is.
Thank you.
So I took a look at what was happening in terms of industrial property supply as part of this cap rate study, and you see there at the north side or the top of the page, that's all the new development within the Arden-Rosser arising from the Westman Water Co-op and water availability. We've all been out Route 90 and seen it. At the bottom of the picture in the middle, that's the location of Murray Industrial Park. And to the east side, that would be St. James, and just to the north of that, opposite and slightly south of the Brookside development, is the Inkster industrial area. So we took a look at what was going on page 7, and of all of the lands in the capital, all of the industrial lands coming online and available, only in the 4 or 5 years leading up to the reference date, only 1/3 of those were located actually within the city of Winnipeg. The balance were located outside, including Rosser. I took a look at, generally speaking, on page 8 and 9, what was happening in terms of the Winnipeg vacancy rates, but bearing in mind that those vacancy rates shown on page 8 include owner-occupied, which by definition are at or near 0. So in terms of our vacancy rate selection, starting on page 8, now I know Mr. Froelich has referred to the Johnson report, and that's the source of our information, but Mr. Johnson reports actually the total inventory in the Murray Park industrial area at about 3.1 million square feet. Of that, 85% is owner-occupied. And so that it has a very small percentage, a very small sample size that are investment type of properties or leased type properties. So that's a very small sample size. We have here a building that's 90,000 square feet. We know the competition in the Northwest Quadrant. And so when I was doing this, I took a look at St. James, I took a look at Inkster, this property, and those vacancy rates are very close to each other. In terms of the level of vacancy, I have compared it to St. James because it is certainly more approximate than Inkster. They both have the same sort of issues with vacancies. On page 9, we see the same table we saw within our industrial capitalization rate study. And so in Winnipeg and St. James, and you'll see a 10-year history there, we look long-term. Those are the rates that include owner-occupied spaces. On page 10, again remembering that there are about 374,000 square feet of investment properties in Murray Park. We took a look at what was going on with the single tenant investment rates over the last 10 years and on page 10, and you can see there the significantly higher vacancy rates when you include or when you exclude the owner-occupieds. So based on all of that, on page 11, our conclusion was that we should appropriately apply 6% vacancy rate to this property, which is what we've done in our analysis. Page 12, 275 is the shortfall rate applied by the city. Non-recovered expenses, and I know that we've all heard the arguments since September, and so I haven't seen any evidence which would lead me to depart from that, and so we continue to apply 7% in our evaluations. 6.3% based on our capitalization rate study is low, particularly for this property. We're using 6.75% here. Go through the mathematics on page 13, and we're looking for a reduction to $6,025,000 based on all of that. And with that, I am open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Mr. Fromer.
How many years in a row have you done this property?
I have no idea.
You have, so you don't know,
Half assessments are never a starting point for me. We look at the current market evidence. That's what we based our evaluations
but
on.
you said you always take a long-term view when it comes to vacancies,
Vacancies.
so, but you don't look at other market information for long-term views? Like you don't look at market rents, you don't look for sales per square foot?
Certainly the information closest to the reference date would be most applicable.
Okay. And do you have any data showing us that the economic conditions are in negative territory or market values have gone down
Well,
since the last assessment?
the evidence that we're presenting here is contained within our brief.
Okay. So you're seeking a reduction of 30% from the recommended value that you settled on in
I
2018?
have no idea what the 2018 was.
I have this information here from a previous board order, if you want it for your review.
Well, I can just tell you that we've been directed not to be
Okay,
looking
which is
at
understandable. Could I,
previous board orders.
okay,
Thank you.
that's fine. So you don't recall anything that had taken place in 2018 at all? No?
Well, generally speaking, but you'll appreciate that we deal with a large number of properties each cycle.
Okay. Did you take the 2018 property to the municipal board?
I don't recall.
Okay. No problems. So, in your 2018 brief that you presented, you asked for a market rent of $6.29, yet you have in your brief today, you're asking for $5.37? Is that correct?
I don't know what was in my 2018 brief,
Okay.
but based on the market evidence closest or related to the April 1, 2018 reference date,
Okay.
that's our information.
Okay, so you didn't review my brief at all then, with regards to what you had presented?
Your brief?
Yeah.
No, no.
Okay. Just let me look at this here. In terms of age and size, would 160 Omens Creek be the best comparable to the subject property?
Well, we're showing 11 here, and I would never select one rental comparable over others. If you're examining the market in general, in terms of what it would attract, in terms of what 90,000 square feet in Murray Industrial Park would attract, given this property's physical characteristics and location, I wouldn't ever rely on a single rental comparable.
So I'm confused though, because you're using the St. James vacancy rate as market evidence, but you're ignoring the Johnson report market rent evidence for vacancy. But, you know, here's a comparable of 160 Omens Creek, which is not very far from the subject property. Built in 1992, the subject property is built in 1999. So it's actually, our building's newer than what I perceive to be the best comparable. It's slightly smaller at $85,199, yet it has a significantly higher rent than the $538 that you're seeking.
It's also the outlier being the highest, right? I wouldn't select the lowest necessarily either.
No, but the point is, you know, but if you're looking at comparables that are 20 years older, would you not do an adjustment for that, Mr. Bergstrom?
And we haven't selected 550 a square foot
Okay.
for the main floor area.
Yeah. And have you utilized any other vacancy rate information from Capital Real Estate, Colliers, you know?
The We haven't used those reports. Some of those reports actually utilize the Johnson reports, and others, it's unclear to me what they've used. We use the Johnson report because it is independently published. It is a subscription published twice a year. It is Mr. Johnson and his predecessor, Mr. Croach, do an extensive survey of all segments of the commercial market in Winnipeg: office, retail, industrial, and including breaking down the square footage in each area. The St. James area is many times larger than Murray Park, and the Inkster Industrial Park area is also much larger than Murray Industrial Park. In particular, the Murray Industrial Park investment properties, the rented properties, is a very, very small segment. Almost all of the properties in there are owner-occupied, like this subject. But if you're going to expose it to the market, now you're exposing 90,000 square feet of 374,000 square feet of rented space in that small industrial park.
Yeah, but we both know that the Murray Industrial Park's a lot larger than 400,000 square feet.
Well, I do know that from the Johnson report, and I think I went over that in our evidence. It is in fact a total of 3.1 million square feet for Murray Industrial Park. Now, St. James, for example, is almost 18 million square feet, so 6 times larger. But Mr. Johnson also breaks down the investment component of that as about 374,500 of that. So you have only 12% of the buildings in Murray Park as investment. The rest are owner-occupied, which will necessarily distort your vacancy rate downward.
But wouldn't a 0% vacancy say that it's a high demand area where there is also?
No, actually, no. What it tells me is that it's mostly owner-occupied.
Okay, but for the available space that is there is no vacancy.
It's 88% owner-occupied.
So, but there is no vacancy.
They're not offered on the
Yeah,
market for
yeah.
these.
Well, whatever is offered in the marketplace has a 0% vacancy, does it not?
In terms of the Murray Park area by Johnson?
I think
Yeah.
Mr. Brooks.
It is.
Can I present this information, Mr. Bergstrom? It's the same information I presented last time.
We're just in the middle of questioning right
Okay.
now. Can you, if you want
Yep,
to
no
present
problem.
it,
It's
is
just
that,
that-
are you
it-
using that as rebuttal?
It will be as rebuttal because it's,
Okay,
I don't know because I haven't seen it yet.
yes.
well, Mr. Bergstrom saw it at the last hearing, so.
Well, that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And
No,
we're
I
just-
mean, last week.
Did
You
you
know-
have any more questions?
You know what? Yeah, just one other question. Looking at the next property that we have here, why is your market rent for this property lower than the building which is older at 1455 Mountain?
Mr. Folick, I'm sorry, we're not discussing, we haven't even
Okay.
discussed the next
No
property,
problem.
so if we can just stick to this
Okay, fair enough.
Salto Crescent, thank you.
Okay, no other questions.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre.
Looking at the pictures, the first question is, what do they do here?
They, going by memory here, they produce packaging.
Well, when I look at some of the pictures, they have quite the infrastructure of manufacturing. Is this not a special purpose building?
No,
It's not.
no. The equipment might be a particular specialty, but the structure is not.
Well, it just looks like some of the configurations.
Yeah. And you know what, it's not at all unusual for particular structures like that. Let me give you the example of the adjacent property, 100 Salto. I've also inspected that property. I've worked for that client for a number of cycles now, and I have inspected the property. They have a significant amount of, I'll call it the steel grate mezzanine around some of the equipment. Its sole function is to allow access to that equipment, maintenance, That's the only reason for its existence. The structure itself, it's north of 500,000 square feet in size, but it is not a special purpose building. It's not even a special, it's easy for me to say, it's not even a special use building because the equipment is readily removable as it is in this location. Just bolted down.
So they make packaging,
Yeah,
and right next door is Winnipeg,
yeah,
which does the same thing,
basically.
And they're not-
It's different from each other.
and they're not related companies.
There is, they are not the same company. They have slightly different ownership structures, but I believe that there is some interconnectivity as between the two.
Okay.
But they are in fact, and in particular, American by Access is actually, the ownership structure is, the ownership is different than, it has some interconnectivity, but it is different than Winnipeg.
So then access wouldn't be a problem to this site.
Well, except that each parcel is an individual site, and you need to determine what is the value of this site standalone. Municipal board has,
No, I appreciate that.
has dealt with that
I think that you've
in
answered my
previous
question.
appeals, yeah, many times in previous appeals. Each rule is a separate matter.
No more questions.
Thank you. Ms. Rowe?
Yes, can you tell me, perhaps I missed this, how many square feet are office space?
So the mezzanine area totals, I think, 7,000 and change square feet. And I think there is some additional space actually. And I'm going back here more than 2 years. I believe there is some additional space here and there in the plant. But our previous calculations indicated something in the range of 11%. I don't know the exact square footage.
Of the total floor area? You-
Yeah,
Okay. Is it air conditioned?
the office area is, yes.
The rest of
The
it?
plant is not.
The plant is not air conditioned. Did the owner actually build this building?
I don't know.
Okay. I'm just wondering how the loading docks got to be configured the way they are.
Yeah, that's a good question,
If-
and I don't know the answer.
Okay. Are there problems with the loading dock for the current owner?
We need to look more than value in use or value to the owner. We're here to determine willing seller, willing buyer. And is on the market, is for loading docks going to be considered adequate for a 90,000 square foot building? It would be, in my view, at the very least, considered minimalist.
It is owner occupied
It
at the
is.
current time?
Yeah.
88%, you said, owner occupied.
No, Murray Industrial Park as a whole
Okay,
had
okay.
88% of the buildings in that area, surveyed by Mr. Johnson,
Okay.
are owner occupied. It's a very small investment segment in there, about 374,000 square feet in size, of about 3 million square feet.
Okay, I get it. Thank you very much.
Actually, to help Brad out, it's in your brief, the office space. On page 3, it says that.
Yeah, it's about 11%, but.
Yeah, like
we
it
don't
almost
give
works out perfect because it's 99,933 on page 3. And, 11% is 10,000, just over 10,000, so it's super close.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Borgstrom, page 7 of your brief, all your lease comparable information, they are all light industrial?
Yes.
Okay. Just curious, do you know what takes place at any of them? And
Yeah.
I'm looking specifically at number 11, Fultz Boulevard.
I'm gonna go by memory here. I believe that is because I didn't bring my sheet, that is one of the tire manufacturers' warehousing. It's not, they don't manufacture in there, it's warehousing.
So it's warehousing, okay. And I'm sorry, I think you may have mentioned it, but I missed Owens Creek.
Yeah,
What takes place there?
that I don't know, because I don't have it here.
Okay, and Sony Place?
That's the old, Gendis building. Was at one time the largest distribution center in Western Canada. That particular area is occupied by, if I recall correctly, ABD, the beer distributor. They had to, there was a significant amount of renovation to allow that expansion to take place, including the addition of loading doors on the front. It was a significant expense. But that, yeah, that's the space.
So it's beer distribution, they're not actually making beer there?
No, yeah.
Okay, and, sorry, and Key Wayton?
79. I do not have that information with me.
Okay.
I've got it for Furniture Park.
Oh, what's Furniture Park is
Palliser,
Palace.
Well, no,
Well,
the tenant there.
predominantly.
So Palliser owns the property.
Right.
But that lease was actually Hunter Wire Products.
Hunter Wire?
Yeah.
And do you know what is taking place in that building?
Well, that would be storage, it's not manufacturing, that would be
Okay.
storage, distribution. Kernahan would be the same thing.
Okay. And the renovation of $3 million on this property?
I actually had no knowledge of it prior to today. It's possible, and certainly the permit would seem to indicate, or from Mr. Froelich's reference to the permit, I would conclude that they're expanding the building area.
Right.
And so two things arise from that. One, it's very likely that a supplementary assessment will be issued once construction is complete, which may not be this year, but the city is certainly, that's certainly within their statutory authority. But the other thing that impacts, depending on the size of it, now you're gonna end up with a smaller land building ratio. So that was not a factor that I was aware of or considered in our opinion.
Right. Just a couple more questions. In regards to the air conditioning, is that a normal thing not to have air conditioning in a manufacturing plant?
It's unusual to actually have air conditioning in industrial areas. It is unusual.
Interesting.
Yeah. In fact, just a quick story, the Gendis building on Sony Place, when Mr. Coleman built it, or expanded it, the expansion was 35-foot wall height, give or take, and they had huge conveyor systems. But he actually put windows and air conditioning in the warehouse space. It was really unusual at the time. I inspected the property going back to the 90s, but it's unusual for warehouse areas to be air conditioned. 630 Kernahan, I've inspected warehouse areas not air conditioned. 770 Pandora, I previously inspected, not air conditioned. So it's unusual to have that.
Wow. Do they not have people working in those warehouses?
Oh, yeah.
Goodness me.
Yep.
Um,
This is why you see loading doors open a lot. For a reason there.
Sorry, and just in regards to access to this property,
Yeah.
so they have to drive through the other building, and
Well,
there's a quasi-relation, or through their property, not through the building. There's a
Yeah.
quasi-relationship between these two?
well, when we, yeah, and so when we look at the picture at the top of page 4, the structure immediately to the south is commonly known as 100 Salto, that's impact. That's actually, it's growing up over the years and they keep expanding, and they've actually amalgamated what used to be 3 rolls there to form now one roll. but they actually access it from Salto across that property to this one. This one as a standalone property, which the municipal board says is what we are to consider, that's an issue.
Okay. Mr. Froelich, I'm just gonna redirect to you. How come there would not be access to this property from Wihuri Road? I'm not sure, I'm trying to read this tiny print. W-I-H, looks like U-R-I?
Yeah, I guess the owners don't feel there's a need for it if they have access to it from the subsequent building, because they're one operation, they work together. So why would they, see, because when you look at their access to the trucks, it just seems to me that it made sense to use off Salto.
Mm.
If there's demand, why spend money if it's not necessary?
Okay,
May I ask?
absolutely.
I'm just wondering, thank you, of your comparables, how many of these do you know have mezzanine floors?
Oh, Kernahan does. So that property was actually, once upon a time, single occupant, 10 acres under roof, give or take. And they had a substantial amount of mezzanine space in there that they used to use for displaying product to buyers for retailing. The space in Sony Place has some mezzanine area in there, but from previous inspections, that was office finished. Pandora, if I recall, had some, but I'm going back to the 90s here, and so I don't have a specific recollection of the area itself. So those are the ones of which I'm quite sure. The rest I wouldn't be able to accurately convey anything to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Froelich, I think you wanted to present some rebuttal.
You know what, we've gone long enough, that's fine,
Okay.
yeah.
So if there's no further questions on this property, we will move on to our last one. Which is 1355 Mountain Avenue. Whenever you are ready, Mr. Froelich?
Bear with me.
Yep.
Need to close up one file before I start the next one. File number is 193544. Roll number is 14041623100. For 2020, the assessed value that we have for this property is $8,570,000. We're asking for the value to be confirmed. Parcel use is industrial light manufacturing. We have two buildings here, both one story, built in 1981. Wall heights are between 11 and 22 feet. 22,234 is at 11 feet. 72,300 is at 22 feet. We have a land area of 518,892. We have a leasable area of 94,534, and we have a land to building ratio of 5.49. For this property, we have not, let me just double check to confirm, we have not placed any additional value for surplus land. However, when we discuss land, and this is applicable to the property as well, it's just, there's a lot of situations that take place where the highest and best use for organizations are to expand their operations. In a perfect world, a 4-to-1 land to building ratio is perfect. But a lot of circumstances, if there's good access and efficient use of loading and unloading areas, it's not a be-all, end-all. And Mr. Borgstrom and I had a situation last week in one of our appeals where at 500 Pandora and 30, I believe it was 30 Kernahan, where the egg manufacturing plant expanded their operations, where they had a land to building ratio of about 3, and now it's 2.5, because it was more efficient for them to expand their operations. We have examples like Sobeys, we have the liquor store, the MLCC on Buffalo Place, lots of examples out there whereby land to building ratios don't always have to be 4-to-1. There's other considerations that need to be there. As we look at the subject property on page 2, this property was owned by owned by Pro REIT, and here's the tenant is Canada Goose. What we have here at we have it listed here at 1465, but it's the same building. You know, this property is a freestanding single tenant industrial building located at 1465 Mountain in Winnipeg, built in 1991. Extensively renovated in 2014, has approximately 94,541 square feet of area, 20-foot high ceilings, 3 loading docks. It only occupies 18% of the 11.9 acres of land, which provides the opportunity to expand the building in the future and to initiate further development. Property is 100% leased to one tenant, long-term lease. Property benefits are well established in the Inkster Industrial Park. Page 3 gives some other highlight histories, and you can see the picture of the loading docks on the bottom of page 3. Some additional shots that I was able to find on the website with regards to on page 4. And the top of page 5 shows where it's located in the Inkster Industrial Park. It's in between Burroughs and Church. And to the west we have Keewatin, and to the east we have Fife. As you can see, the operations here on the bottom of page 5, lots of developmental potential to expand the operations. Property owner has been compliant with regards to filling out income and expense mailers. Unfortunately, these mailers are very hard to read, or very difficult. So what I've done is I've just done print screens of them. So we do have the Canada Goose leases here in place. We're showing rents of $5.95. And as you can see here, it's 100% totally occupied. And then also you can see that there's a step-up lease in place that's taking place, jumping up to $6.95 in 2020. So with a lease like this, leases aren't going down in value. Here's an overall view of where the leases are. The lease does expire in 2025, so there's lots of stability with regards to this property. Page 7 just shows the footprint of it. Like I said, on page 8, you can see a small portion of the income and expense mailer. They're very hard to read. So I blocked it out, but when I did research for this property, as you can see, there's a registered date for a sale that took place on July 3rd. I've excluded it, but all the information with the research that I've done to this, so there weren't any listings for this property, but based on the research that I've conducted, I have reason to believe that the sale price had taken place before the April 1st, 2018 deadline. I haven't included it, but what has happened is, based on my information, and there's reports that have taken place, there are media reports here that I could share if need be. talking about how ProReit had purchased this property and others in the area. And so it's one of the reasons why when I looked at that sale price and I looked at our assessed value, I believe it's quite fair. With that being forward, what do we have here for rents? So what we have is for the manufacturer, we're using a $6 and say 37-cent a square foot rent for this property. We're at $94,534. We're at 602's net income. We have a vacancy loss of 3.5%. Expenses at 2%, shortfall at 375. Coming up with a net operating income of 557,056. Using a cap rate of 6.5%, we have a value of $8,570,000. Just for, I use the same comparables as I did last time. And we've discussed everything else. That concludes my formal presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Borgstrom, questions?
Just a few. Subject property is tenant occupied, correct?
Yep.
And it is in fact a 2-unit building that is occupied by a single tenant, correct?
That's correct.
Previously it was occupied by 2 separate tenants, correct?
The previous,
Previously was occupied by 2 separate tenants.
I don't have access to that information.
Don't have access. Did you review previous appeal files on this property?
No, I didn't. I may have it here. Just bear with me. Due to workloads, sometimes I've printed it, sometimes I haven't. And in this circumstance, I do not have it.
Okay, fair enough. So you've acknowledged that the subject property is leased, and that lease amount is the legally binding rent that is required to be paid by the tenant, correct?
Yep.
It is all the landlord is entitled to receive, correct?
Correct.
And that lease rate would be binding on any subsequent purchaser, right?
Yes.
Now, the rental rate includes the entire site, land and building both?
Yep.
And in terms of the information on your page 9, you're elected not to make an adjustment to the actual rent on a site-specific basis?
Yeah, and that's based on the sale price of what the property sold for.
You're aware, are you not, that that is a portfolio sale?
Yes, I am aware of it. I have it right here.
And an allocation?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in terms of the 3.5% vacancy loss, you've referred to previously to market reports. Do you know what those market reports show for the Northwest Quadrant?
Yeah, well, yes, I do, actually. So at the end of the quarter, for the capital commercial real estate, they're showing 3% in the north.
So Q1 2018 for the Northwest Quadrant?
Can you let me answer the question, Mr. Borgstrom?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So with vacancy analysis, we're always trying to find a middle point. There's high, there's low. In the southwest quadrant, we have a very low vacancy rate, but we still have a 2.5%, even though the market information is under 1% for the southwest quadrant. So based on what I have here for the Winnipeg industrial market rent, so at the end of the quarter 4 2017, Northwest is showing 3%. And to confirm what Mr. Borgstrom said, let me...
I'm just asking which report you're looking at there.
Well, the first report I looked at is not allowing me to answer my question, though.
Well, I just want to know
Just wanted.
Okay, so
which broker.
Capital Commercial Real Estate is one. Cushman Wakefield is another.
So Q4.
Colliers is the third. Those are the 3 reports that I have.
Now, Capital Commercial Real Estate for Q4 2017, you're suggesting for the Northwest, they're saying what for a vacancy rate?
They had 6.1%.
For Q1 of 18.
That is correct.
What about Q4 of 17, which you just referred to?
They had 3%.
For the Northwest?
That's what I'm reading right here.
And Q1 of 18 was 6.1?
That's 6.1, yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a wild fluctuation, does it not?
Yeah, but the Cushman Wakefield also shows 3% for Northwest.
And Cushman Wakefield report actually quotes the Johnson report statistics, which include owner occupied, right?
Well, but we base our information on what's provided by outside sources. If they're showing 3%, we're going with that.
So again, the Cushman Wakefield report is using the statistics, including owner occupied from the Johnson report, are they not?
Also from the Collier's report, they also have 3.66%. And the market's the market, you have to include owner occupied with regards to doing analysis for a vacancy.
Okay, so I'm going to try one more time to take you back to the question that was asked. The Cushman Wakefield report, the statistics that they quote in there, quote the Johnson report statistics, which include owner occupied spaces, correct?
Yes.
The department subscribes to the Johnson report, do they not?
Yes.
So on your page 2, you referred to some renovations that happened in 2014. Do you know what those renovations were?
What I did is I just did a quick overview of it, and that information is based on, I didn't show it here, but it's based on, they said it was renovated in 2014, and by looking at the curb appeal of the building, I think they did quite a significant amount of renovations. I don't know the details.
So you don't know the details.
No, I do not.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
Just one on the renovations. For a building built in 81 and renovated in 2014 and had what appears to be extensive renovations, why is there no effective age?
You know what, when we look, which is why I'm confirming the assessed value today, is because once we do an inspection, once we do an overview of it, then we will be changing the effective age moving forward possibly.
And then a supplementary assessment?
That'll be a decision made by the manager at the time.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you. Ms. Runkle?
Yes, I'm looking at page 6, request for income information. And I see that Shaw Business Solutions are indicated there as a rooftop applicant
Yeah.
or tenant. I don't, would you consider that a tenant? I don't know, but they
No.
must get some income, I'm imagining, from.
Well, they haven't reported any,
Okay,
and by looking at it, there doesn't seem to be a satellite tower on the site. So I don't know the details of what they have here. They're not reporting it as income. So that, could have factored the sale price, but they didn't provide that information, so I can't defend something if I don't have it.
okay, thank you. Those are all my questions, thanks.
Thank you. So, Mr. Froelich, page 9 of your brief is all model driven, correct?
That is correct.
And the rents are model driven?
That is correct.
And your cap rate is model? Just in regards to your vacancy, you were talking about various reports earlier.
Yep.
So, you were comparing, I don't know if you were actually comparing, but stating about the southwest quadrant being at 2.5 vacancy and the northwest at 3. Is the southwest quadrant regarded as more a desirable area than
It
the
has been
northwest?
recently, yes, yeah.
Okay.
But, our vacancy rate here for this property is 3.5%. And so, based on our evidence, we're just not isolating one report because, one sale or one report doesn't make market evidence. So we're looking at other players within the marketplace as well to come up with our vacancy rate.
So are you suggesting then that your vacancy rate on page 9 was not model driven?
No, it was model driven, but it's based on information that we've attained from all the major players within the Winnipeg marketplace.
Okay. So then, have the modelers taken all the vacancy rates by all the various reports and plugged it in?
You know what, I'm not a modeler, so I
I
can't.
know.
You know what, I don't know their operations that extensively. I know a very macro perspective.
And this is manufacturing, this is Canada Goose, they are
Yep.
making garments, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gorstrom.
So I'm going to start out by describing this building a little bit. I can tell you, just because we've been talking about these renovations, I can tell you that I have previously inspected this property. I can tell you that one half of the property was previously occupied by Hewlett Packard as a call center. Fully fitted out, about 50% of the building as complete office space. Those were the renovations that were done for this tenant. They had to totally remove all that space because they're now doing manufacturing there. I can tell you, that was at the front of the building. The rear of the building was actually occupied by the province of Manitoba and by recollection, emergency measures, the EMO occupied it. No office space in there other than a little shipping office, and they stored supplies. That's previous to Canada Goose occupying it, so I inspected it a number of years ago. Quite correctly, when Canada Goose came in here, there were extensive renovations required, but that was the removal of the 100% office fit out for HB. And it was a call center. The whatever tower was there has been removed. I know it still shows up on the red wall, but there is no additional income from that. Where there is income from things like that, certainly in previous hearings, I do include that within our analysis. So we're going to take a look at, or start now at page 7. There is a rent in place at $5.95 a square foot. That isn't a stepped up rent. Okay, that was a rent step starting August 1st of 2016, and let me just take you to page 20 for verification of that. See there a step August 1st, 2016 to $5.95 a square foot, and then a subsequent one in 2020, which we're not concerned about here today. But certainly that's an indication to me that this rent, that there isn't a reason to vary from this stated rent, the contract rent. Certainly all of the assessors rental comparables are contract rents. We did take a look at a number of rental comparables, the buildings will differ just for comparison purposes, but in my mind, the best indicator for this property is the actual rent in place of $5.95, and that's what we've applied in our analysis. Vacancy, in particular, I want to take you to our page 9, and I have very particularly included the Inkster industrial area here, and these are statistics from the very detailed Johnson report. The statistics in the second table on page 9 include owner-occupied properties. You look at the 5 years leading up to the reference date, including owner-occupied in Inkster Industrial, 4.5, 6, 6.9, 5.9, 2.6, but then increasing back up to 4.5% in 2017. If you're standing there looking at this property, April 1st of 2018, you're not considering a 3.5% vacancy rate. These are owner-occupied. The subject is certainly leased, including owner-occupied. 3.5 is just not the right number. We took a look on page 10, again, very particularly at investment properties. This is a 2-unit rental property that happens to be occupied by a single tenant, but whether you look at the single tenant or the multi-tenant, you're at a vacancy rate as they're published there 10. We also need, on page 11, we also need to consider the effect of vacancy, but also collection loss. That's a loss in revenue from a tenant doing a midnight move-out, from a tenant going bankrupt, uncollectible rent, also known as bad debts. And so ultimately, we stabilize for the subject property at 6% in our analysis. Turning to page 12, 375 shortfall, 7% as non-recoverable, and with this vintage of property, 7% being built in 1981, 7% is certainly the capitalization rate that the market would view it at. So we're looking for a reduction to $6,721,000. And I think that is the information we wanted to cover here. Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out on page 3, and we've certainly put this in previous briefs, 2015, third paragraph, 2015 was when Canada used to full occupancy of the property. They had to spend a considerable amount, as I said, to remove the previous improvements. All of those expenses were amortized into the rent. So the rental rate at $5.95 a square foot includes a repayment of all those TIs. Now, we haven't made an adjustment. We know the city says you can't consider TIs, but if you were to remove the TIs from that, the rent would be significantly lower than that. We're still applying the $5.95 a square foot. And with that, I am open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Froelich.
Is Winnipeg a stable marketplace for industrial properties?
A stable marketplace?
Stable market, is it one that has huge fluctuations and increases and decreases?
I don't think that the industrial market experiences huge fluctuations.
No. And usually, most part, have there been any drops in real estate values in industrial properties in recent years?
On an individual site-specific basis, much depends on the individual property.
And so, why would another party purchase such a property for investment purposes if it was, why would ProREIT purchase this property if it was a bad investment?
Well, again, that's a post-reference sale that I've certainly not referred to within our reference.
Exactly. But you wouldn't have considered it with regards to your market valuation?
Again, that is post-reference, and we are precluded from considering it
Okay.
based on a number of decisions, including Broadway Square, which I believe you'd be familiar with.
Yeah. And did you do any sort of adjustment with regards to the land to building ratio?
Well, the rental rate in place includes the building and all of the land. And I've certainly seen land to building ratios north of this, and we have not made any adjustment for that.
What was the 10-year average of vacancy that you've provided in your report?
Well, there are a number of 10-year spans that we examined.
I'm referencing the one on page 9.
Okay, and so that includes owner occupied. And I haven't calculated it, but I can if you want.
No, it works out to 4.47%. So I'm just curious why.
Including the owner occupied, yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't disagree with the calculation.
Okay. And you're using 6?
Yes.
And you talk about vacancy loss. Doesn't the assessment department provide a 2% adjustment for vacancy loss issues?
No.
Well, why do we give the 2%?
Structural reserve.
Structural reserve and other factors as well.
Vacancy loss would not be included in there.
And so what is the vacancy going to be for this building?
Hang on one sec. It says other expenses, not vacancy. So on page 21 of your, well, I'll call it the manual, refers to other expenses. And so if we also look at the rebuttal package that was previously submitted, I'm happy to go over that as well.
Okay.
But bad debts are not included within that percentage.
But on page 14 of our brief, we do provide a shortfall allowance to account for non-recoverable expenses associated with vacant space.
Which is entirely different than bad debts.
No other questions?
It's the holding of the real estate, you're paying property taxes, insurance, certainly some nominal utilities in there, and that's what that is for, not bad debts.
Yeah, but as you can see on their income and expense mailer, they are recovering property taxes and management and everything else in operation expenses, are they not? Another, on page 6 of their mailer.
Yeah, it's a net lease.
Okay. No other questions?
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre.
I have no questions, thank you.
I have no questions, thank you.
So you had inspected this property, Mr.
Oh,
Borgstrom?
quite a number of years ago, yeah, when I viewed the packet, it's still in there.
Okay. Page 11 of your brief,
Mhm.
the top of the page, when you're talking about vacancy and collection loss.
Yeah.
I have never come across this in any of your briefs in such detail.
I don't know what to say to that.
Okay. Well, okay, then maybe perhaps I'll rephrase that it's pointed out.
Yes, there are two separate components to any allowance, or any revenue loss allowance. One would be vacancy, that's a loss of rent, but also there's an additional amount, and you'll see it sometimes on the financial statements, bad debt expense.
Exactly.
It's different, separate and apart from, for example, professional fees, for example, the lawyer's costs to sue the company to recover rent, which may or may not be successful, that's a different amount. That would be included in our 7%, but the actual loss in revenue from that would be included within the collection loss.
Okay. Would it have anything to do, vacancy, also with what is taking place in the building?
Not typically. Unless the building has some characteristics that would make it difficult to lease, that might attract a higher vacancy rate, or it might experience a higher vacancy in attempting to re-lease the property. That's not the case here. But if you're standing there, hypothetically, a vacant building as of April 1st of 2018, because we are hypothetically valuing it as if vacant, certainly any investor would consider the vacancy, and I've already gone over the impact of the Brookside development, but certainly in Inkster, we know that Inkster over the years has suffered from an elevated vacancy rate historically.
And that would be
It's-
due to the expansion of the Southwest?
No, primarily due to the competition arising from the north of it, in Brookside.
Oh, in the Brook, okay.
And it's older stock, certainly
Yeah.
in this area, I mean, originally going back to the 1970s and roughly mid-80s, some newer, but not many, is an area that became essentially fully developed, but it is an area that is now considered to be a little under-demolished. Older properties are not attracting the revenues, particularly with the competition, not just Brookside, but you have the Inksbrook area as well on the east side of Route 90, north of Inkster. Those are the more modern tilt-up concrete panel structures attracting a much higher rent. Inkster Industrial Park in itself is, I don't say struggling, but it has challenges.
Thank you, that's all my questions. And this hearing is concluded, and I thank you both for your time today.